Okay, so I wanted to ask you about feedback regarding last week in terms of how you felt with the nutritional things that we suggested. We had a little series of tasks that I recommended or tips. And I wondered, what happened this week with those? Were you able to implement any?
Yes. Yeah. So firstly, you had asked the question, where do we want to be in 12, maybe 24 months? And so that was the first thing I answered. And basically, I had already said that to you when I started, really just to be able to feel well enough to. I'm not sick. Please put it down. Don't. I'm not sick.
No.
I just don't feel. For instance, even with some of the exercises I was doing, like my tummy is like a hindrance. My lower role that I've developed. So to enjoy exercises because I'm not restricted.
Okay.
And things like being able to run, do an easy 5K little jog, not run, a little jog, those sort of things. So those were my, and I know with, being able to do all of that, so much else feels better, as far as your energy and just your positive frame of mind and so on.
Yeah.
And then as far as the managing to follow, the low carb, so I quite got into the checking up on my phone, how many carbs in just the general type of foods I've been eating, and that was really interesting.
Okay.
And the subject I teach is consumer studies. So basically the old home economics. I'm sure you remember the old home economics.
God, I remember that.
So I teach at collegiate, and I had a matric girl who had to miss her final prac, and I took her individually. I took her through her final exam pad. Came the part I had to now test her food, and like your voice went through my brain the whole time. It's not a train smash. Don't beat yourself up because now you have to break what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that was actually quite an interesting thing to have going in the back of my mind. And so in fact, yesterday I had
to break that protection thing. Sorry.
Yes,
it's quite tough. Okay,
I think I am that sort of personality where you sort of I go 120%, and then I beat myself up if I'm 99%.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good. I mean, it's got to be a lifestyle, something you can do. It can't be, okay, now I've buggered the whole thing up, it can't be that.
No. Okay, you want to say something about, did you say something about do you have a daughter? You said something?
Yeah, I had Jess, our daughter, she had her in-laws, no, not her in-laws, they're not married. She had her future in-laws here over the weekend, and I had them for supper last night. So of course there was wine, and I'd made beef enough, and lovely salads, and yes, I enjoyed all that. Okay. Skipped the dessert, but back on the wagon again. Back doing the right thing the whole of today, which is great.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, that's great. I always like that sort of, it's good when you have that sort of, especially when you've just used that language that we spoke about last time, which is getting back on the wagon and doing things properly. And that's the thing we want to dispel. There's no such thing as properly or improperly. It's just what works for the physical body versus what works for the emotional body. So last night was, like an emotional body requirement. And it was enjoyable from that point of view. So I think it's always better to avoid using the terms, getting back to. I think it's just, at the moment I'm in this phase, and most of the time I'm in that phase, and it's just so that you just start to see it as normal. It's normal. It's not this is bad and that's good, because that is the tendency is, and it goes through in many other levels and in different facets, is this idea that when you're in your emotional state, it's bad, but when you're in your physical and looking after it from a purist point of view, it's good. But actually, who's to say, a half a bottle of wine or a bottle of wine and some dessert isn't the ideal thing for you in that moment, because it perfectly kind of supplied you with the things that you needed. And what you needed might have just been a bliss experience. Whereas at other times you might need the physical kind of nutrition or the nutrition for the physical body. So I think we just I think we're just far too rooted in like thinking about ourselves as purely physical. And there's a lot to the pleasure that we get from things. And we have to learn to be a lot less judgmental about enjoying something, even because our brain says it's wrong. I mean, it's a bit of a nightmare, and it's quite hard to work around because it's what we've been conditioned to believe. But I do think it's imperative to try and get out of that headspace. So you're not climbing back on the wagon. You're not coming back to perfection. You're not coming back to the right thing. You're just in a different space today, tomorrow, whenever, what you're doing. Yeah. Okay. So the carb checking you've done, and that was quite interesting. You are obviously clear on, you're thinking about things differently. And did you manage to add more fat to your food in general?
Yeah, so when it came to making eggs, cooking in butter.
Yeah.
And then the yogurt I have in the fridge is full cream yogurt, and I only use full cream milk and that sort of thing. That I've done for a good while already.
Lovely. Yeah.
And also full cream cottage cheese.
Yeah.
Full fat rather.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So those were sort of fairly minimal differences for you. Might be the mindset thing that was the biggest one.
I think the interesting thing as well is, you eat vegetables, and the amount of carbs in veg, I hadn't really considered that. You just automatically think vegetables, no carbs,
Yeah.
and a plate of salad has carbs.
Oh, okay. So my tendency when I'm working with clients is to say, don't worry about any vegetable barring potatoes, because they are an intense kind of starchy carb. I mean, so is butternut, so are carrots, so are beetroots, but you're not likely to eat a huge number of those. Whereas potatoes and sweet potatoes, we're more inclined to eat quite, a lot at a time. So yes, a potato salad is very bloody delicious, but yes, relatively heavy in carbs, ish, really in carbs. Actually, your cold starches are better than your heated starches, like we spoke about last week with the rice. And when you cook it and cool it, so a potato salad would be better than a baked or boiled or hot potato, essentially.
Why would the heat be a difference, Tanya?
It's on first cooking. So what happens with your retrograded starches is that when you heat them and then they're absorbed into the body, on that first cooking, the starch, I don't know if it's amylase or amylase is obviously the starch kind of sugar, but there might be others as well that are released that the body then absorbs very quickly, so it then spikes blood sugar. Whereas when you cool it, you almost relock it. So it's this weird thing. I mean, it's just astounding that it changes the molecular structure of it, so that it almost becomes much harder for the body to access the sugars. Don't ask me exactly how that. I mean, I wrote about it in the book, and I researched it. In fact, I first heard about that from Margot de Quirker in PE. We were chatting about rice, and she spoke about this, and I was fascinated by it. So it's something to do with, it's at first cooking, it's released rapidly in that cooking, but if you let it cool, it changes the structure. As it's cooling, it obviously does something to change the way the body can access the sugars. So it's the better bet. I don't think it's by an enormous amount, but I think every little bit counts. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so that's great feedback. We're going to get on to looking at change. So a big thing for me, and I love this particular topic, but this is about understanding why it's so hard to change habits. And I think this is an imperative thing for people to appreciate, because it really is. We all know it's difficult to change, and it's almost like we come into these programs and these kind of we have these goals, and we set up, maybe it's the start of the new year, and we've got these resolutions, and we never, no matter how many times it goes wrong, we never seem to appreciate how hard it is and why it's hard. And so obviously the minute you know why it's hard from a neurological point of view, from all sorts of conditioning point of view, it's then easier to build a way to be successful with change. And that's essentially what we're going to cover tonight, is why it's so hard to change. So I wanted to start off with, and Elsner, I know you're going to be watching this as well, so you need to do this exercise. It's a useful exercise. You don't need to do it, but I recommend it. So Jenny, maybe just giving yourself a figure right now out of 10, with 1 being really I'm not very motivated at all, and 10 being tell me what to do yesterday because I'm that amped. Maybe just think about the number you're at currently.
Yeah, it's definitely on the 8 and up. That's very motivated.
All right, that's great. We'll redo this exercise at the end of the session, but I'm always interested in the numbers that aren't 10, because it tells me there's some reservations. So you're not quite sold on this yet, and that's fine. So let's see if I can change your mind.
I am sold.
Well, you're not sold on the fact that you think you can change and actually do what you like to set out to do. You might have faith in me and the information. You may not have those extra 2 numbers might be missing from your sense of what you can manage. They might not. I'm just surmising. So, okay. All right. So let's go into really why change is so difficult to put into place. And I think it really does start with this concept of software or the subconscious, because the subconscious or the software is what drives everything. Our programming is what drives everything. Every choice we make, every thought we have, every action we do is driven by our software. And that's typically, and this is the very hard thing about knowing this when you're a mother, a conscious parent, is that by the time your child is 6 or 7, their subconscious is set by you. So your worldview is what shapes their worldview until they get to our sort of age where we have that midlife crisis and we go, hang on, I don't think that's quite my view. I think that was my mother's or my father's or, or society's, or, I mean, hopefully we get there sooner. But so the point is that we tend to adopt a view that's given to us by whoever our guardians are, by our school for sure, by the people who influence us at school, society, parents, everyone who has influence over us in those formative years. So if we're going to be successful with change, we have to understand what we were taught about ourselves and the world, because that's the only way that we will change the subconscious. And then obviously once we have some ideas about what our programming is causing us to do and to think and to say and to believe, then we can decide what we actually believe and what we don't believe. And I think that I think this is one this leads the pack. It's no surprise it's first off. It's at the top of the list because it is the driver. And so if you were, let's say you take a child who, I don't know, is taught that they are, maybe they were given messages around being really creative and, they've got these great ideas and they're full of kind of bright concepts, but they just never complete any tasks. So they get hammered through their childhood for just not finishing projects, not finishing kind of things they start. They just have this tendency to just not complete. And so that's something that a person, an adult, will carry through with them for life until they've actually looked at what that is about and what it means and how to change it. And so it means that anything that this person starts, they're going to have an inbuilt mechanism that will sabotage them when they get towards anywhere close to completing. Because what we know, regardless of whether it's negative or positive in terms of habits, what we know and what there's safety in knowing something, even if it's a negative. So if your parents always told you never completed, there's a degree of security in knowing that. And so our behavior fits exactly what we were taught about ourselves. And then when we try and change that behavior, we'll find ways unconsciously. So you can always consciously want to do something, but unconsciously there are other reasons you're going to carry on doing what you were always doing. So you'll find ways to sabotage yourself. And that's what fascinates me, is that, when I get into a situation with clients where they know what to do, they've got this strong conscious desire to lose weight. As an example, I've got let's say, years ago, I had a client who was extremely overweight. I was desperately trying to lose the weight, and she had this very strong conscious desire, but she just kept not being able to do the things that she was meant to, that she had committed to doing. And so eventually we got her to do a list of pros and cons. We took an A4 page and we split it down the middle, and we said, what are the pros of losing weight? Those are typically easy because it's what society says about weight loss. Oh, we'll feel sexier, we'll be healthier, we'll live longer, we'll feel better about ourselves, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But it's the cons that I'm most interested in, because those are the subconscious drivers. So what is the disbenefit of losing weight? And for her, it was a profound one, because what came up was that she was molested by a family member. She got larger and larger as her childhood went on, and she was 5 at the time. And so she became fat to protect herself from being sexual and then being taken advantage of. And so even though she was an adult now, and she knew that she was safe because she had, there was all this other stuff going on. So it's really, even if there's just one profound con or disbenefit, it's going to mean that sabotage happens. And so we had to look at this, at maybe some therapy work around this particular issue, because it was such a deep-seated issue. I had another client who said, had the same desire to lose weight, same conscious drive, but the subconscious was something different. And when we unpacked it in this way, she said, I know what's going to happen if I lose weight. I can't stand my husband anymore. I'm going to end up leaving him, and then I'm going to break up the family, and the kids are going to suffer because of it. And it was fascinating. I mean, it was amazing that she got to recognizing that was the problem. Really interesting. So I think we have to be very, very aware that there might be, you can't arm wrestle the subconscious. You can't arm wrestle it. It doesn't work like that. So we have to be very sure of what is driving all the underlying stuff in order to be able to have a grip on how to change it. And even that's difficult, because it's a lifetime of doing certain things and believing a certain thing. So for me, the task is, what are our limiting beliefs? So if I've been trying to lose weight for a long time and I haven't been successful, why haven't I been successful? It's not likely because I haven't committed to, most people will commit to an exercise program for a certain amount of time, or healthy eating for a certain amount of time. But it's the stuff that creeps in that we start with the sabotage stuff that we need to then think about. I'm not, I'm not valuable. I'm not attractive. I'll never achieve it because I never manage. I'm not disciplined. I'm not, I just can't get it right. I can never get it right. Those sorts of things are the things we're looking for. So I would suggest unpacking those limiting beliefs. What stops us that we're not necessarily consciously aware of. And then it comes to sort of the fact that the brain, our neurology, is very, very focused on patterns. So, and the reason for that is that patterns allow us shortcuts in thinking. They allow us to stereotype. So think about it from a caveman days. If we saw it, every time we saw that saber-toothed tiger, we had to sit and think, now, is this a dangerous animal? Will this eat me if I come too close to it? And then we have to look, oh no, it's got long claws, it's very powerful looking, it's got these long teeth, and it runs no, actually it's quite dangerous. And instead, what we did is we saw it and we clocked danger straight away. So we bypassed that whole thinking process. In the same way, we don't have to relearn walking every day, or brushing our teeth, or doing this or doing that, or doing whatever it is that we do, by rote. And we do it by rote because we've got the neural networks to support that pattern of thinking. And then the engrams, which are the physical components of the neural networks that support the doing. So it's we do that to conserve energy. Our nervous system is designed to conserve energy. And that's the other reason we should be very cautious about beating ourselves up when we can't change. We're not designed to change particularly easily. In fact, we're designed to maintain the same habits. So it's bloody hard. The use it or lose it principle, I guess, have you got biology background or biochemistry background? Okay, so you know what happens in terms of neural networks branching together, creating those lovely superhighways that allow that thought, essentially, that impulse to cross over it. And so if we think the same thing, let's assume it's oh, I can't stand myself. I get up in the morning, I look at myself in the mirror and I think, oh, I can't, I can't bear it. I really don't like what I look like. Then, and imagine that we think that every day over a period of years or months at least, what happens is we're creating a neural network that will very easily allow that impulse, I can't stand myself, to run over it. And so we create this lovely, beautifully paved, smooth 4-lane highway of neural networking that supports I hate myself, or I hate my body. And so it takes a long time to build an alternate network that says something completely different before we can create potholes and tumbleweed and disuse on this superhighway in order to actually create an alternate superhighway that says, I love, maybe it's not I love my body yet, but maybe it's I love that I feel strong. My legs are carrying me. They can do all sorts of amazing things. I'm putting effort into changing and I feel proud of I don't know, whatever those messages are. But we have to build the alternate, because otherwise we just keep going back. And again, we know what that's like. And I always think this task of brushing teeth with the opposite hand is a perfect example of how hard it is. So you start kind of getting in, I'm a right-hander, and then it's like, like how do you get into the right areas and do the what?
Yes.
Because we just pick it up with the right hand, we do what we do, and sometimes you even forget you've done your teeth because it was so subconscious, you just did it. So I think that's quite a nice exercise, because it's the reminder of the fact that it's going to be difficult to change, it's going to take time, and it's going to take practice, and it's going to feel really weird, and you're going to constantly want to go back. So yeah, that's something I think worth giving some thought to. This one, it's like the Stephen Covey I don't know if you've read his highly effective habits, I think it's the 8, is it? I can't remember the title of his book. I read it so long ago. The Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's essentially talks about this quadrant where you take a page, you split it in 4, and you've got urgent and important, and not urgent and not important. 7 habits of highly effective people.
7,
yeah. So urgent is stuff that's really hitting you right now that just needs to be addressed because it's on your plate. Whereas important is the stuff that is meaningful to you long term. Now, unfortunately, our weight goals, our health goals, our physical activity goals are all important. They never really seem to be, they're never urgent, because whether or not you go to gym today, it's not going to change anything. It's just not going to change anything. It's not going to change particularly how you feel. It's not going to change anything in terms of what's happening in your day. In fact, most of the time, it's just going to take up time. This is how we tend to view it. Whereas we need to go shopping for food tonight because we'll have nothing to eat. And we know what that feels like. That's a more urgent drive, because I don't want to go to sleep hungry. Or I've got a deadline for work, and so I'm going to bypass my important goal to make sure I can deal with the urgent one. So the only way that I think is useful to change this is if we start to try, and when we're doing the task that's important, we need to find a hook that will bring us back to it. Like, I sleep so much better when I exercise. I can feel the endorphins flowing, so I feel more upbeat. I don't know, any number of things. You've got to actually just think about, when you're eating a healthy meal, what does it make you feel? So that in that moment, you create a short-term result that increases your motivation to come back to it. Because that's the big thing, is like, it doesn't matter whether I do it today or in a week's time. And then we do that for years on end before we kind of go, oh shit, I meant to start exercising 3 years ago and I still haven't started, because it's important, but it's not urgent. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, and as I said, there's no obvious consequence when it's important, but there is an obvious consequence when it's urgent. So that's the big difference for me. Okay, so this one is interesting because I think most people, and this is where I tend to see the 8 out of 10, 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10. It's like, I'm not sure what you're going to tell me I have to do, so I'm not quite going to commit to 10, because you might tell me I have to go, like, you know, I don't know, without food for X amount of time, or I have to give up chocolate, or I have to give up wine, and I think that's what this one is addressing. So we're a bit nervous about what we think we'll have to give up. Now, what you know, obviously, in terms of what we've spoken about already, is that I don't do diets. That doesn't interest me in the slightest. So there's no food. Okay, there are two foods I'll tell you never to touch. One is artificial sweetener. The other one is margarine. Apart from that, everything's on the table. So
never been in my house.
yeah. So, you know, it's so for me, it's the diet mentality that, like, oh, and I'm on a diet, I'm on the wagon, I've got to do it perfectly, I've got to do it right, I must, you know, I can't have this, I can't have that, I mustn't do this, I mustn't do that, I can't, you know, that's awful. So we know that we want to build that flexible mentality that has got nothing to do with what I should and shouldn't do. It's more about what I'd like to do. And then it's the all or nothing mindset, which is exactly what you spoke about, which is what you tend to do, versus the some of the time, most of the time, which allows for that freedom. And it's a punitive versus a gentle approach. To my mind, we're very punitive. What I see in the gyms is mostly punitive behavior. It's mostly driven by, I did something bad, I'm paying for it now. You know, rather than, oh, this just makes me feel so good, I want to be here because it just feels like it's doing something really positive for me. Most of the time people are going because, oh, well, I ate pizza and beer last night, you know, or, oh, I had that chocolate, and, you know, I want to be able to eat chocolate tomorrow. So this is just my way of doing the whole kind of, you know, this for that. So my task suggestion here is to actively stop trying to achieve goals perfectly. So in other words, build in, and I do it with clients, we build in the so-called mistakes, the so-called kind of, you know, danger food. We build in the some of the time foods, and we do that on purpose so that they start getting used to the idea of dealing with and coping with not doing it perfectly. So they've just started this program and you feel great. It's exactly what happened to you in the home ec kind of, you know, class. It's like, oh, but I just started, and what will it mean if I had taste this thing? You know, because typically what it means is, oh, well, I might as well just carry on.
Day screwed.
Yeah. Shit that I've always, you know, that I've been wanting to eat for a while. But it's crazy. It's mad. It's a mad approach. And if we don't jump on a wagon, then we're never in a position where we're saying to ourselves, oh, I can never eat that again until I'm off this diet. So if you have some pasta and you have some bread and you have some, doesn't matter, because there's no food you can't eat. So you eat that food, you enjoy it for what it is, and then the next meal is back to, you know, whatever. Most of the time foods. So yeah, that's something to think about. I think this is another one, fearing the journey towards the goal, because of course it can seem like a very far distance to, for example, get rid of a roll of abdominal fat, or go from being able to, you know, maybe huffing and puffing while I walk to actually having a 5K jog, or, you know, whatever those goals are that and that's why it's important to think long term. But also it's important to break things down into smaller chunks so that we can manage those chunks. And so I think this is something we're going to need. I think we're going to be doing this next week. So I need both you and Elsner to be thinking about your goals. So you've given me a general idea of your goals. What we're going to be doing is putting it into these short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals. So we need to start thinking about, okay, if my long-term goal is to feel well enough to enjoy exercise without any kind of physical encumbrance, and I want to be able to do a 5K jog, then so that's my long-term goal. Let's call that 12 months. What's my medium-term goal? So where do I want to be at the halfway point? Okay. And then where do I want to be if I'm taking the 6-month mark as a halfway point, then what do I want to do to break it down on a week-by-week basis that will allow me to get to that midpoint? Okay, so I worry about my short-term goals leading up to that. That's my medium, that's my long. When I get to that medium-term goal, that halfway point, then I can set up my next lot of short-term goals. So it could be that, and we'll talk about this in more depth, but we'll build it so that it's a very structured step by step, and you're not doing more than 1 or 2 changes at a time. And those might be 2 very different, like drink more water and stick to your training 3.5 hours a week. Could just be that. And we do that until that's rock solid. And then we maybe add another change. Maybe that change is practice intermittent fasting for X number of hours, whatever. Okay, so my point is that it'll be a structured thing, but you need to start thinking about that in terms of breaking this down. So that will be your homework between now and next week, is having a sense of how you're going to break this down into smaller parts to support that long-term goal. Okay. Fearing resistance from others. So yes, I think this is also tricky because I see a lot of couples, and often they will talk about the fact that they get kind of waylaid by their partners or husbands or wives, where they're desperately trying to keep themselves committed to something. And then maybe they've got a husband who loves chocolate and brings it out every night. And he's, you know, he can manage it because he's not struggling, but she can't. And it's a real problem for her. And so sometimes we need to ask others to help support us. And we say, you know, things like, I don't know, please just don't offer me the chocolate. So go and eat it somewhere else. So I don't know about it. I don't hear it, the wrapper. I don't see it, hide it somewhere. You know, we just put systems in place that aid us. So if it was, you know, I don't know what your deal is anymore, but I can remember going off to the hostel with my mates at times and eating their sandwiches. You know, the sandwiches that used to be that the hostel was served on break for the girls. They just had tons and tons of sandwiches. And, you know, if you were a teacher trying to avoid bread, it's like, well, what do I do there? You know, so you got to find a different way to deal with that. It's the temptations, it's the relationship with people who might actually quite like where you are and you know, the position and the condition you're in, because maybe they feel bad about themselves and you're helping them feel better about themselves. And when you start to change, they kind of resist that. And so it's a sort of subtle manipulation that tends to happen. And also just, you know, this last one about who will I be if I do change, is sometimes it can impact on how we view ourselves from a point of view of, you know, if I think about myself, a lot of people have a particular view on me because of what I do and because of what I look like. They make assumptions, but they also, you know, a lot of people won't invite me around for dinner. That's been a thing for me. You know, I'm a very sociable person and I can totally let my hair down. I can be off duty, you know, it comes to wine and dessert, and if you ask my closest mates, I can eat 3-4 plates of food at a time. I can eat big. And when I'm off duty, I'm off duty. But people don't necessarily realize that. And so sometimes when we make the switch and we become healthier, it impacts on others. It's like not drinking at a social event. People hate that. If you don't drink, you make them look at themselves and go, oh, I don't think I could do that. And so they try and push you to drink. It's that kind of thing. So it's maybe worth thinking about, and I think communicating with the people who matter to you and you matter to, is to say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I need your help. Can you help me in this particular way? And then
I've got my family on board. I mean, my son's room, he's got the best Wi-Fi. So he knows it's checkout time.
Okay, brilliant. Great. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Okay, so then making changes. If I think about why my successful clients were, oh, that's interesting. It's not showing me the rest of my slide.
There we go.
No, this is, that's going back. Okay, just give me a second. Sorry. It's, I think it's on one of the, it's because of the, There we go. It's the coding on it in terms of, yeah. All right. So these are for me, when I'm working with clients who end up being very successful, these are the primary things that I've noticed are common to all of them. So it's awareness of what they're looking to change. It's awareness of what they're doing to sabotage themselves. They're a little bit enlightened about their behavior. Okay, they've given it some thought. Obviously, attitude is important. So there's no good coming in kind of wailing and gnashing teeth. It's like, okay, I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to change. This is what I want to do, and so I'm going to do it. The action is very considered. So they have a very specific action they're going to take. It's not just, I'm going to just try and exercise more regularly. It's, I'm going to train 3 times a week at a certain time for a certain amount of time. So it's very intentional. They do tend to look for information to support what they're doing, because that's part of the process of ensuring that they know what they're doing. Taking responsibility is a massive one. And that's something that is very important to me as an educator, is that responsibility is taken by the client. So that's why I never give out a diet plan or anything. I've had so many people through the years say, oh, just tell me what to eat. And I mean, that just doesn't interest me at all, because I'm an educator. But also, how is that helpful to you? You know, if I'm going to tell you what, and how can I possibly tell you what to do? I know what works for me, but you have to work out what works for you. So there is that. And typically my clients are almost always older, which means they're wiser about understanding how this works. And so they're willing to take that responsibility and take the jump and experiment and reach the conclusions they need to through their own kind of processing of that information. And yeah, I mean, I suppose this is always my hope that they enjoy it, but they always seem to be quite, quite enjoy the process of getting where they want to go. So I think that's one that's useful to add in there. And then in terms of making things stick, I think there are some imperatives. So these are, for me, the important elements of being successful with change as well. Obviously, being patient. I mean, that's a big one. I know so many people who want to just get it, you know, show me what to do. I want it done tomorrow. And it's never going to work like that, you know. Yeah. It's like the hare and the tortoise. I think just the slow, steady, plod, 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 plod is the only way. If you think about it, if you've got to give up a year or two so that for the rest of your life you're in your absolutely most perfect, ideal state, what's a year or two? You know, choosing a level of intervention. So it's about deciding whether I'm going to just do like very basic, change water, put more fat in, add more vegetables, or go and see a therapist to deal with my sense of lack of self-value or self-love, you know. So we have to look at kind of where we're going to make the choices, the differences, the changes. Choose the behavior. So of course there are sort of practical applications to that. You need to decide what those are. Planning. So, you know, we know that planning is the only way to manage this, because then we can stick to something. It's much easier when we see something. We know that we've got a system to follow. And that makes it easier than just, because it's too easy to let things go when we don't actually have anything preset. You know, it's like the good old study plan. You know, everyone, you know, you have to have some sort of idea of how much time you need to put into various subjects in order to get the best outcome. So I think that's planning is always an imperative. And as I said, practicing is the thing that is going to change. So you can't change unless you practice the change. So it's, you know, I always have an example around, for me, when I had Cassie, I've got one child, and when I had her, I had an emergency cesarean. I had counted on a home birth, actually, in fact, originally a water birth and then a home birth, and then it all went horribly wrong, and I had to have an emergency cesarean. And then as soon as the Caesar wound was healed, I started dry skin brushing across the wound. Okay, so these days, and then within three months, I had dealt with all the scar tissue. So you can't even see that line anymore. It's just on my bikini line. There's no scar tissue. It's the thinnest line possible. You wouldn't even know it's there. And this process of dry skin brushing is brilliant, and we'll deal with that when we deal with the supporting detoxification pathways. But I always have a brush in my bathroom, and it's the thing that I do before I bath or shower is pick it up and dry skin brush all over my body. But the thing about that is, and it's a perfect example, if you don't pick it up every time, you just kind of get into the bathroom, and I make it, several times I've kind of got into the headspace where I thought, oh no, I'm in a rush. I can't do that right now. And if I do that more than, I would say, 2 days in a row, that's it. It's like, oh, I forget to do it now. Like the third time I come into the bathroom, I forget. Whereas if I do it every single time before I get into the bath, it's an automatic. But it's just, that's a perfect example of how difficult it is to make something stick. And it's only when you take it and you do it every single day that it then becomes, oh, by rote, I walk into the bathroom, I pick up the brush, and off I go. Okay, so that's an important one, which is why it takes time to change. So we can't do 10 changes at once. It's ridiculous. We'll never manage. We'll never get it right.
Yeah.
And then obviously recognize when success occurs, because it's too hard otherwise to just, work ourselves to death and think, oh, I'm so useless. I haven't managed, can't get it right, etc. Okay, so that's the change part. And obviously what I want to do every time we do a session is give you some practical tools. I've given you some tasks to think about, but I want to cover now, especially with regard to nutrition, because that's the big thing that interests everyone around the menopause and weight and, getting healthy and all the rest. So I thought that we would move into intermittent fasting and just discuss that so that we've got some tools that you can start working with this week as well. And you may already be practicing that. I'm not sure where you're at with intermittent fasting. And Elsna, I think this is, given the question you gave us last week about should you eat 5 small meals a day, this is a very pertinent one for you this evening. Jenny, are you intermittent fasting?
I fast, yeah.
Okay, so
you've got a bad, at the moment it's a bad connection, Tanya. Sorry.
Oh, is that your side?
My side, yeah. It goes in and out.
Oh, can you change rooms?
I don't know whether it's going to help. I don't know what's going on.
Okay, all right. Do you want to try it? And
okay,
then...
it seems to be. It seems to be better.
Okay, so.
Sometimes even just moving to a different spot in the room. Yeah, we try that. Okay.
Yeah, maybe also try switch your video off. Because sometimes that just adds just too much dark. Okay. All right. Should we try that? Okay. Just shout if it doesn't work, because we obviously there's no point if you can't hear. Okay, yeah. So just moving into, you're already doing the intermittent fasting, so that's great. Yeah. I just want to go through some of the reasoning behind it and the benefits of it and the options that you have, so we can just kind of discuss that as well. So we know already that it's, this extended period of temporary hunger, and I'm going through this for Elsna's sake as well, because I think this is a new concept. So it's an extended period of just temporary hunger with a period of eating. So essentially it's about when you eat, it's not about what you eat. And the idea very basically is that if you've got 3 types of fuel cells in the body. You've got the muscle cells, which are what allowed you to literally, me moving my limbs at this point is because I've got glucose inside those muscle cells. So that's allowing me to move my body. My liver storing a whole lot of glucose or glycogen for when these muscles run out. And so then the liver will convert that glycogen into glucose and supply the muscle cells. My muscles have got around about 2 hours worth of fuel. My liver's got around about 8 to 10 hours worth of fuel. So I've got about 12 hours worth of fuel in total in just my muscle and my liver cells. Okay. So what I want to do is I want to empty those two. I want to empty that 12 hours worth of fuel so that the fuel that's sitting in my fat cells can be forced out and used for energy. There's no point in consistently putting food into me and restocking the liver fuel and restocking the muscle fuel if I've got a ton of fatty acids or fats sitting in my fat cells, and it's energy that I could be using. So the beauty of intermittent fasting is that it is about emptying out the fat cells. So every hour that goes by where you're not taking food in after your 12 hours of depleting the liver and the muscle cells, every hour that you spend without food is just forcing all these lovely fatty acids out of the fat cells. Okay. And they come out of the fat cells as fatty acids. They get converted into ketones, and then the liver can utilize those and supply the muscle cells with those with that glucose made from ketones. So it's a really nice system to dump excess body fat back into the body in order to use as fuel to supply the liver and the muscle cells. Okay, and often that fuel gets in there because we eat either excessive carbohydrates is typically why we end up storing so much fat, is from consuming a lot of carbohydrates. It's very rare that I meet someone who just eats too much fat and it's excess fat that, you know, that kind of it's not being utilized by the body. So you really, you know, you want a two-pronged approach. The one is to reduce the amount of carbs you're eating so that you're not storing excess, and the other is that you're getting rid of any excess on a daily basis. So that's the beauty of intermittent fasting. Having said that, and I mentioned this last week, is females are much more sensitive than men around caloric restriction. So we have to just be cautious. This is a menopause program. So, of course, we're done with this idea of being, you know, needing fertility and wanting to have children. I'm sure I can speak for all three of us that, you know, we're probably over that period. So we're not necessarily looking at some of the issues relating to fertility that relate to female hormones and caloric restriction, but we are saying that we are hypersensitive, and what we don't want to do is mess with a hormonal balance. So you're looking at no less than 12 hours of fasting, because anything less than that, you haven't actually depleted the muscle and the muscle and liver necessarily, but no more than 16 hours. So my tendency is to go for 16 hours. So if you can start to delay breakfast, if you need a task on this one, Jenny, how many hours do you typically fast?
My supper is normally done by 6:30, and by 10:30 is the first time I'm going to eat. So it's about 16 hours.
Yeah, that's about right. So Elsner, for you could start to just think about maybe bringing breakfast in a little bit later and later and later and later until eventually you maybe hit that 16 hours. And Jenny, I don't know if you remember, but for me, I think it was it probably took me probably 2 weeks to get to the point where I was very comfortable with it. And it's been yeah, I mean it happens pretty quickly, and for me, I think it's been about 10 years of fasting, and pretty much most mornings. So yeah, that's maybe something that you can try. And then just your other options. But I think the 16-hour most days of the week is our ideal. There is the crescendo method, which is exactly what we're doing, and it's the range. For men, it's much longer. They can do up to 22 hours a day without really causing any harm. And it can be anything from 2 to 3 times weekly to 7 days weekly. Then there's a full day fast, which I don't like for females, and I just don't like in general. I really struggle to fast for 24 hours. And that's 1 to 2 times weekly, but I don't think that's very useful for women. And then there's the 5-2, which is just 5 days of normal eating, 2 days at a radical caloric restriction. And again, I'm not particularly comfortable with that. I don't really like my clients doing that. I much prefer them just to delay breakfast, because that just seems to be the easiest version for everyone to follow. And it's not very, they don't get too kind of hung up on, sitting through a day of not eating. So I prefer that. And then I just want to show you, I mean, there are just so many benefits to intermittent fasting. I think it's just the most, it's been the most impressive tool, one of the most impressive tools I've used to stay lean. And as I say, I've been, I think, leaner in my last 10 years than I was in my 20s and 30s. I'd say my late 40s, mid 40s to now. So these are amazing benefits. You can see, I mean, I won't read them out, but you can see that these are pretty profound health and weight benefits. I'm going to send you the link so you girls can always go through this if you want to. And yeah, if you need to have a closer look at that, you can do so. So it has a lot of benefit to it. I think that's the only thing that we need to just caution against, and it depends on whether you're still getting a period or not. I'm perimenopausal, so I still get my period. And so, Jenny, are you still in a menstrual cycle?
No, not at all.
Okay, so I'll need to ask Elsner that, because that will impact then on exactly what we do in terms of the so you may be different to, for example, what I'm doing, which may be different to what Elsner is doing in terms of what we follow as a trend when we get to the part where we talk about putting that diet, those elements together with the intermittent fasting and the keto, and then the keto cycling. So we'll come to that. Right now, it's just about, so for you, it's continuing with the intermittent fasting. It's looking at those other tasks that you need to do. It's putting a little bit of time aside for setting and getting an idea of your action plan, okay, and your goals. And for Elsner, the extra one will be practicing setting breakfast back a little bit. So, Jenny, given all of that we've discussed, I don't know if that changes anything for you in terms of level of motivation, and it might not, and that's fine. But I'm wondering if it might have. I think always when we can understand the difficulty as because of the way we're set up as humans, I think it makes it much easier to be less judgy about not managing. And I think that can in itself can be quite motivating, or can help us kind of appreciate that actually it's normal. It's normal to struggle. I struggle with any change I make, it's very normal. So your number, you were at about 8. You might still be.
Yeah. No, I am motivated. I'm very motivated.
Okay.
Yeah, I really am. I thought maybe it would be a bit presumptuous to put myself at 10 immediately. But
no. Okay, no, not at all. I mean, it's always music to my ears, because it just means, being open to essentially hearing whatever needs to be heard or doing whatever needs to be done in order to get to that end goal. So no, 10 out of 10 is great. That's super. So yeah, have a think. I think that's kind of do you have any questions? We got 2 minutes.
No, just so that intermittent fasting, you reckon then every day is fine, not to have, so that's what I've been doing. And you mentioned breakfast. So do you still say 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day? That's
no, I kind of, breakfast for me is at lunchtime at 12, and then
it's brunch.
Yeah, and then I call it brunch, and then normally I'll eat around 7 in the evenings, like 12 and 7. And because I eat a lot, well, maybe 6:30 even, but because I eat an enormous amount of fat, I don't typically need a snack in between,
Yeah.
So it just really depends on you. If you need a snack, that's also fine. But yeah, it's 2 meals, basically 2 meals. But with sufficient amounts of fat in those 2 meals that you generally want to try, remember, because we're trying to also rest the mitochondria. So if we can avoid eating in between those 2 meals, that would be ideal. But then it means bringing enough fat in to both, where we just are sustained without feeling the need for a snack.
Okay.
All right.
I've got to get better as far as what I'm packing for that first meal at school. You know, you tend to go for what is the easiest and sort of, yogurt, and you tend to eat the same thing every day, which is not either good.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to discussing options, and we can hammer out some of these kinds of issues, together. So we'll get to that for sure.
Okay.
Other alternatives. Yeah. All right. Super.
Thanks, Tanya. That's great.
My pleasure.
Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good evening.
Thank you for the conversation. You too. We see you.
Okay.
Well, see you with the exercise
Yeah.
the next.
Hopefully, we'll see you maybe online as well for class tomorrow if you
tomorrow.
get it.
Yeah. I will do that tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
Cheers then.
Bye-bye.
Bye.